Hello and welcome to this 40 Days live event. This gathering is called Intersecting Identities, Intergenerational Asian Voices, and it features Ibi, Hannah, Jenna, and Wingy. We will introduce our panel more fully in a moment, but first, just a few words of welcome. My name is Adele Halliday, and I serve as the Anti-Racism and Equity Lead Staff at the National Office of the United Church, and we're glad that you're here. I'm one of the people who's coordinating the 40 days of engagement on anti-racism. So the next slide, please. The 40 days is part of a, this event is part of a broader program, the 40 days of engagement on anti-racism, where there are daily written reflections, there are books of the week and several live events. This event, as all other events, is being recorded and will be available on YouTube for those who would like to see it afterwards. This is the final week for new daily written reflections for the 40 days. These are the featured writers for this week. This event is part of that as well, and there's also a featured book. So if you can go to the next slide, please. The featured book is called Jesus and the Marginalized, and it's Jesus Christ for Koreans in the United Church of Canada. It's a great book. That's available from the United Church Bookstore, and it's possible to order this book and many others. And if you enter the discount code 40 days, you would receive a discount of 20% off this book. So it's a great resource to pick up. Let's go to the last slide, please. So all this information and more is available on the website for the 40 days of engagement on anti-racism, and some additional resources are there as well. So hope that you will continue to find ways to engage in this program as a whole on this day and other days. With that, I will turn it over to Jenna, who is moderating this evening's event and who will guide us through the rest of the evening. So over to you, Jenna, and thank you.
Thank you, Adele. So hello and welcome, everyone. As Adele mentioned, my name is Jenna Yango Leonard, and I'm going to be moderating this evening's panel. So before we get started, if any of you feel led, why don't we all just put into the chat box where we're all calling in from. So I'm calling in from Uxbridge. So for those of you who aren't from Southern Ontario, it's just about an hour north of Toronto there. So still in that kind of a central space. And yeah, so as Adele mentioned, tonight we're going to be discussing the topic of intersecting identities. With the focus on intergenerational Asian voices. And I'm so pleased and so fortunate to be able to present here today along with our panelists here, Wingy, Hannah, and Ibi. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about their experiences and more about their wisdoms that they have to share with us about how our intersecting identities and how we have been able to interact with this topic here tonight. So before we get started, I just want to give you a little bit of a roadmap to what we're going to be doing this evening so you know what to expect and where we're going to be going. So we're going to be heading into some quick introductions from our panel shortly. But first, I want to just touch base with you all on what we mean when we're talking about intersecting identities. So I'm sure that most of you are already well aware of what an intersecting identity is and what intersecting means and all of those different pieces and how those pieces can play out in our own lives. But to make sure that we're all on the same page, I just want to touch base on the perspective we're coming from tonight. So what does it mean to have intersecting identities? So the first piece of the first place we're coming from is the idea that our identities consist of multiple and intersecting factors. So, you know, those things happen. So when we're talking about race or ethnicity or gender or sexual identity or gender expression or age, there are many different factors that intersect together to help us kind of create this piece of life that we call identity. And so that's where we see what those factors include. And our identities aren't static and they change and develop over time. So one good example of that is age. So no matter how hard we try to stay the same age, we will always get 1 year older and 1 year older and 1 year older. So identities don't stay the same. They're not static. They move and develop just as we move and develop. Looking at other ways that they develop is sometimes we have external factors that change what our identities are. So I don't know if any of you know Trevor Noah, but he's a comedian. And in one of his stand-up specials, coming from South Africa, being mixed race, he talks about being considered mixed race in South Africa. But then when he immigrated to the United States, all of a sudden, his racial identity was no longer mixed race, but became Black. So sometimes there are external forces that try to dictate our identity pieces for us. So that can create some struggle and intersection as well. And then there are just pieces that intersect. So the way that those intersections work and the way that they come to be, even if we can be so similar on paper to everyone, to other people around us, the way that those intersections come and come across each other, that's how we create these unique experiences and these unique ways of seeing the world. So a good example of that is for any of you who have siblings. So I have two brothers, and my brothers, so my older brother and I were both born in Japan. We both have interracial parents. We both grew up in Scarborough and went to school overseas and had all these similar experiences. But because of the ways our identities have come together, even though on paper, so much of our lived experience is the same, those pieces of identity and the way that they come together really create these unique experiences for us. With kind of this basis of understanding, I'm going to hand it over to our panelists now to give introductions of themselves. And we're going to start now with Wing.
Thank you, Jenna. Hi, everyone. My name is Wong. You can call me Wing or Wen Yi. That is my Chinese name. Wing means singing. Yi means a present in the ancient Chinese. So the meaning of my name could be praising the gift of God. Before I came to study abroad, I worked as a full-time minister in Hong Kong. After finishing my Master of Theology in Preaching in the US, I embarked on my doctoral journey in Toronto. Currently, I am a PhD candidate in homiletics at Emmanuel College, University of Toronto. I am now a member of College Street United Church, serving as both a preacher and a children minister. I also regularly do supply preaching at various United churches, including trilingual Asian diaspora communities. Thank you for having me today. I'm excited to share and learn from all of you this evening.
Okay, thank you, Wing Yi. Hannah, can we get some? Let's hear from you next.
Thank you, Jenna. My name is Hannah Kim-Cragg. My pronouns are she, her. I am a racialized settler on Turtle Island, and I hold both Korean and white Canadian heritage. I grew up in the church, and I'm often known by association through my parents, David and her, and Kim-Cragg, who are very active in the United Church. But as for myself, I was always a member of First Grosvenor Park United Church in Saskatoon, and now help my dad at Richmond Hill, St. Matthew's United Church, in music worship. But in terms of anti-racism and racial justice work, I began as in the youth team in 2021, working with the United Church office, and helping to engage young people in anti-racism work within the church. And I'm very excited to be here, and I thank everyone for coming today.
Thank you, Hannah. Ibi?
Hi, thanks, Jenna. Hi, my name is Ibi, and you see my last name is Chuan, and I'm the Taiwan indigenous, which is belong to a tribe called Bunun. So if you know Taiwan, and we live in the central mountains. So, and you can Google my tribe. My full name is Ibi Sokuman Tanapima Takbanwat Bunun. There's no last name in it, so don't bother it. Just call me Ibi. So I'm now serving in the Cranbrook United Church in East Kootenay in British Columbia. So serving in the main white dominant church. So this is a really good place for me, and I've been serving here for 7 years, and I've been part of the United Church for over seven years. So I'm also part of the Anti-Racism Common Table members, and thank you for having me, and good to see everyone tonight.
Thank you. So as for me, as I mentioned, my name is Jenna, and I grew up being a mixed kid. Though as I get ready to celebrate my 35th birthday in a couple of weeks, I'm realizing that I've long outgrown that kid moniker. So again, identity, not static. So the mixed part comes from my dad being of Ilocano descent from the Philippines, and my mom being of Anglo heritage settler from Sydney, Nova Scotia. I was born in Japan, though I have no claim whatsoever to being a Japanese unless you consider appreciation for their food culture. Most of my life I've spent in Southern Ontario, though I did have the great pleasure and fortune to be able to spend 7 years living in the Philippines during my adolescent and teen years. Though even that portion I spent predominantly at an American evangelical school. So, you know, again, those different pieces that inform you. Currently, I am serving at the United Church of Canada Foundation as the foundation coordinator. So that's working with all of our wonderful communities of faith and other organizations that might be hoping to get some grants through our Seeds of Hope program, but then also working with our great team to work on our 4 priority areas, of which one is anti-racism. So it's been a joy to be able to be part of that team here at the foundation. So thank you, E.B., Hannah, and Winnie for sharing and for introducing us to you guys. So we're going to get started with our questions now. And I'm just going to share my screen again so we can all look at that first question together. So the first place that we're going to start talking about is to consider the question, as we continue to discuss and define intersecting identities, how would you each define or describe how intersecting identities have impacted your life, considering your perspective as an Asian person? And a bonus, no problem if you can, but if you are able to, if you could give an example of how that intersecting identity has impacted your life within the United Church, that would be fantastic as well. And why don't we start with Evie this time?
Right. Thank you, Jenna. So as Jenna mentioned earlier a little bit about this topic, I think that's the learning intersecting identities. It's for many people have very similar experience, but for some people, they have quite sort of like unexpected experience, because it is an ongoing conversation for persons who are experiencing having the intersecting identity, like moving to different places or learning a different, because you're not only recognizing the difference, but also embracing it. So it sounds like very abstract, but this is actually very important for people when people learning what does it mean intersecting identities, which is for my experience, I've lived in Canada for almost 18 years and doing my master degree and also doctorate degree, and then coming to our church who are largely white people in the congregations. And my background is unique because I'm from the indigenous group and coming to a different community and country. So I don't know if you can sense my my feeling is coming to a different places and doing a different work. It's kind of a separation from familiar, because without people immigrating to other country, like coming to Canada, they can have a new life, they can have a new things, right? But first thing is they have to experience they're separating from those things that they have familiar. They're separating from their friends, life, the job they used to do, a lot of things that use like lifestyle, and they may experience the resistance in living in the current lifestyle. So they have to come to a point that in my cases, all of the years, people see me really enjoying life in Canada. This is true. Indeed, I really like Canada. But every once in a while, I have to make adjustment in order to tell me what should I do next and what am I trying to do right now. Because you always have something to put you back, or you're from Taiwan, you're from your tribe, and there's something that you can never forget, and different and habits and different lifestyle. So being an intersecting identities person, the impact not only those, because you must consciously decide how you will live and what kind of person you will become now or in the future. But for some people, most of the people who are raised or born in Canada, you probably have similar, similar experience. But this kind of experience that I just described, it's happened very often. I mean, from my own experience, and you have to tell yourself what kind of personality and spirituality you will bring into the group, into your community, into the people that you live in. For me, to the church that you are serving, and how alive you intend to be. And as you can see, I'm trying to do very positively in this intersecting identities, but a lot of time people have many challenges and difficulties to do this. But I have intent to do this practice again and again, because why? I have 3 children. They always ask me question, how did you do that? Because people always misunderstood I'm Japanese, I'm Filipinos or something, other people. And I just tell them that you just have to learn to understand that people have different experience and different background and opinion. But important is you must consistently decide and to learn it, how you will live your life and what kind of person you will become. I mean, this is a very easy to understand, but a lot of time if people can really learn this kind of inner conversations to themselves, and this is very sometimes it's really beneficial, because the one can be very helpful to others. Like for myself, I help my kids to understand why people wanted to say that, oh, you have a darker skin. And my kids would say, they're so funny because we speak English. We're sort of like born and raised here, but people still see us as the outsider. But that is their case. And so we just have to spend time to talk about it. You just have to try to not distracted by those, because they may have not yet learned the different cultural perspective or different identities that other people have. So, but for me, how does this impact? I just share that this has actually been an ongoing practice, and a lot of the adjustment you make in every once in a while. But I realized that when my background was the Presbyterian Church back in Taiwan, but when I came to Canada, joined the United Church, I realized the United Church have given a really broadened view on this intersecting identity, because not only in Canada people can experience the races, but back in Taiwan or other country, you might have something similar happen. But in United Church people, I'm not saying that everyone is anti-racism, but they do have something happen as well. But I'm saying that in the United Church, very friendly, people trying their best to make an effort to create a better environment and make a better world for everyone. And I have learned and beneficial from this, and that's why I love our church and not United Church. So I mean, this is giving me a lot of the new perspective, because having the intersecting identities and actually can bring a lot of possibility. But I will just stop sharing from here so we can hear others.
Thank you, Ibi. That's great. And I take to heart your mention of just how you have to always be conscious and make those constant adjustments. It's never just life as is. There's always a constant movement. Thank you. Hannah, can we move to you next? Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna, and thank you, Evie. When I was thinking of this question, one of the main themes, and this is more on the challenges, I guess, of intersecting identities, one of the words that came to mind was invalidation. So on various levels growing up, I was taught implicitly and in various spaces to invalidate or minimize my experiences with racism. And part of that, I think, had to do with how I did not see myself as a person of color for a very long time growing up, because biracial was no different than being white. And on top of that, I didn't have as much of a connection being born in Canada, and not having as much time in Korea to really explore or own the Asian side of my identity, my Korean side. But even then, I struggled with the common experiences of the Asian diaspora in Canada with stereotypes of the model minority, where we don't talk about our problems, to kind of put our head down and work. And so on top of that layer of not really feeling that I could validate my racialized identity, I couldn't really, I still struggled with the racism that existed in all the spaces that I was in school, and through the media. And on top of that, being a girl growing up, and taught to be understanding before being heard. And so all of this insecurity with being biracial and having these anti-Asian racist stereotypes, and this gendered aspect to it that kind of taught me to be more silent and to listen, and to not really have these thoughts on my own. And then in church spaces, I think, kind of touching on growing up in UCC and being a younger person in church spaces, it was natural for me to be a listener. And even though there were opportunities to engage in the service and to participate, they were very selective. And one big thing I think about being in church spaces for myself was not having a role model with similar experiences to me to talk about these feelings, or to stop and consider how racism impacted me on a systemic level. Because much of the education that when I was growing up was on the individual racism, and how people have a personal responsibility to be kind to others and to be accepting. So even now in church spaces and in spaces where there's decision making, I do still struggle with validating myself to propose ideas with confidence. And I've obviously grown a lot that I can own what I denied myself for such a long time of being a person of color. But I think, touching kind of on Evie's point as well, to end my piece, this idea of fluidity and refinding how I identify and present myself in both Korean Christian spaces, in predominantly white Christian spaces, in how I'm growing and now more of a mentor to some than the younger person in the space. So, and also as a Christian, and what that means for myself.
Well, that's great, Hannah. I take your point of that feeling of being invalidated, especially with those identities of Asian and, the stereotype of the passive Asian as well as this passive woman. So I really take to heart those comments you have. Winnie, if we can move on to your reflection here.
Wow, thank you for the sharing. Yeah, when I think of this question, I agree that what Jenna shared with us at the very beginning, that intersecting identities refer to the multiple dimensions of a person's social identity that intersect and interact with one another, shaping our worldviews and experiences. And I would like to bring in the concept of in-betweenness to help us reflect on our intersecting identities. Homi Bhabha, a postcolonial scholar, refers to the concept of in-between space as a site of cultural hybridity and negotiation, where different identities and cultures intersect and interact. Generally speaking, the in-between space is a place of ambiguity, where dominant and subordinate cultures clash, but also where new forms of cultural expression and resistance can emerge. Let me share my personal experience of in-betweenness as an example to illustrate how it has shaped my understanding of intersecting identities. Coming from a metropolitan city where my culture is dominant in the place, I only became aware of my subordinate status until I went to study abroad in North America. Suddenly, I found myself categorized as an Asian woman, a term I seldom thought of before. This clash between my subordinate culture and the dominant white culture in North America made me realize that I was being racialized, meaning that I was seen as a non-white person on this land. My skin color, accent, and appearance influenced how people perceived me. I became a racialized person, navigating myself in a strange world, wondering where I truly fit in and feeling like I am living in an in-between space. However, this in-between experience has also created a new chance for me to deeply reflect on my intersecting identities. Having migrated from Hong Kong to the United States and then to Canada in recent years, I've come to realize that hybridity is the true essence when it comes to one's identity. I am a Hong Konger from a traditional Chinese family. I am an international student and new immigrant in Canada. I teach people how to speak better in a language that is unfamiliar to me in my preaching class. I am also an Asian woman attending an English-speaking church as a regular member and supply preacher. The experience of living in between spaces and cultures reflects the complexity, diversity, and beauty of ourselves and our world. It shows that both we and the world are not simply black or white, English or Chinese, but we are non-binary, hybrid. And these are many intersections where new conversations and possibilities often emerge from these in-between spaces. And I believe that God is present in all these in-between spaces. My hybridity has allowed me to experience God's love, helping me navigate myself in this world and enabling genuine conversations with many people.
Thank you, Ling. I really love what you're talking about with that in-betweenness. Growing up, I was always, we called that liminal space. So this idea of you're not here and you're not there. And like I mentioned, I grew up a little bit in the Philippines, and I attended missionary kids schools. And so there's this idea with the white American missionaries around me that they were neither here nor there either, right? So they're not like their white American parents who were born and bred American and chose to come to the Philippines, but neither were they Filipinos that were born in the Philippines. But there was a big piece that they also didn't see because they would pair me into that group of, oh, you're just like us, Jenna. And the language and the disparaging comments I would hear about what they would call the nationals and how stupid the nationals are. Oh, nationals can never be really beautiful and they don't really know what's going on. And this disparaging commentary that I would just hear all the time, but because they consider me to be in this liminal space with them, of being neither here nor there, when I would speak up and say, you know, those nationals that you're talking about are my family. Those are my aunts and my uncles. That's my father, my grandmother. And there was a disconnect with an ability to understand that. And in considering this idea of intersecting identities, I think that more and more, I think we are beginning to talk more about how we are all, regardless of how you perceive yourself, we all have these intersecting identities. But for those of us who maybe have certain identifiers that we might wear on our faces, we are forced into these sort of roles that people want us to play. And to me, this idea of intersecting identities, I always fight between that space of saying who I am and performing who I'm told to be. And one of the living in Canada, one of the benefits that I have is that I have a white passing voice. So whenever I'm on the phone, I'm a white passing person. You can't tell that I might not be white. So that affords me a lot of benefits when I am speaking to people, when I'm talking to people. There's an assumption of a shared background. There's assumption of a shared experience. But it also means that when I enter into those spaces where I'm going into that white passing role, I have to leave a piece of me, a piece of that identity. I have to pull that intersection out of me so that I can enter into that dominant cultural space. And there is that tension that happens. And just going back to EB again, what you're saying, that constant adjustment that we have to make with each interaction, it can be difficult. And this is going into my little bonus piece of within the United Church of Canada. I think one of the benefits I have with my role in working with our Seeds of Hope granting program at the foundation is I get to talk to so many different people who are telling me about their wonderful programs and projects that are going on. But whenever I talk to someone who's coming from an ethnic church or a racialized space, there's always, well, I'm from the Filipino church, or I'm from the Chinese church, or I'm from the Korean church, or I'm from the Black church. There's always an indicator of where that person comes from. And I find those conversations are very different and have to start with, you need to understand my identity before you can understand my project. And I feel like there is that common space of feeling like that invalidation that Hannah talked about, and that constant adjustment that Evie talked about, as well as that in-betweenness of part of the church, but still not quite there, that Winnie you're talking about. And I think that this space here is wonderful to hear from some of the positive experiences we've had with the church and some of the breaths of fresh air that I think the United Church of Canada can offer us in some spaces, as well as challenge us here in the United Church of ways that we can continue to develop ourselves and develop better practices to understand that we need to come to the table with an understanding of these intersecting identities that we are all wanting to be able to see and be heard with, so that we can come as full people here to the table. So thank you all. Those were wonderful, wonderful reflections on that question. What are some common misconceptions that you have experienced regarding what it means to be part of the Asian diaspora? And how have intersectional identities, whether or not it's your own or others that you might be encountering, shaped these misconceptions? And then that little bonus, have you ever encountered any of these misconceptions within United Church spaces? So Hannah, I think we'll start with you. And I know you were talking a little bit about that connection to the diaspora. So I'm eager to hear what you have to say.
My piece is a bit short for this question, but because I know for many racialized communities, and not only the Asian diaspora, the idea of being a monolith is a common misconception. The assumptions that people carry about you that invalidate the varying and diverse perspectives that we've shared in this space together, and many, many more that are not in this space. And so kind of putting that pin there for my own experience, and one that I feel has been common in the church, in both predominantly white Western Anglo churches and in Korean church spaces that are in Canada that I've encountered, is that the idea of being mixed race or biracial and that identities has been sometimes fetishized by people or idealized, especially in Canada, where we consider ourselves to be a multicultural country, multicultural nation, that my existence as a mixed race person is this beautiful multicultural phenomenon or an example of that. And so I think seeing this is sometimes a misconception, that seeing my existence as an ideal can be validating or welcoming, where in reality, and some of the pieces that I shared in the previous question, it's a very messy experience, and there's a lot of insecurities and layers to it that is more than just this beauty of being a bridge between two seemingly opposing cultures. And so that's the one piece that I wanted to bring to this question.
Thank you, Hannah. No, I really appreciate that idea of calling forth that idea of the monolith and that expectation of you succeed because of your existence. That's such a potent way to think about that. Thank you. Wing, let's move back to you.
Sure, yeah. I think one common misconception surrounding the Asian diaspora is the perception that regards Asians as perpetual outsiders or foreigners, regardless of their birthplace or upbringing in a particular country. This misconception can lead to feelings of exclusion and being seen as other. When I was planning to pursue my doctoral studies in North America, one time I was seeking advice from a professor. At the end of our conversation, she made an odd remark that just stuck with me. She said, "I hope you will find the education here helpful when you go back to your place next year." With that statement, the meeting abruptly ended. On my way home, I couldn't help but question if it was my English proficiency or the noise in the cafe that had hindered our communication. I also wonder if her response was a subtle indication that she doubted my abilities for further study. The uncertainty surrounding her response weighed heavily on me. It was not until I learned more about white supremacy and racism that I started to realize that, regardless of the professor's intentions, my discomfort stemmed from their gazing at me as an outsider, both geographically and academically. Essentially, I was made to feel like I didn't belong, like a perpetual foreigner who would always be seen as someone who would necessarily return to their home country. Because this land would never truly embrace someone who looks like me. This realization helped me understand the broader context of the interaction. It reminded me that perceiving individuals as outsiders based solely on their racial or ethnic background is a result of a limited understanding of identity. Intersectionality teaches that our identities are complex and interconnected. Asians within the diaspora also hold multiple intersecting identities beyond their race or ethnicity, just like what Hannah just shared with us.
Thank you, Wing. Yeah, I really appreciate that calling forth the importance of recognizing that those microaggressive comments that people make, those pieces that continually remind us that we are other and that we don't quite belong. It's easy to think, oh, well, when someone says where you're from, they're just trying to be polite. It's just a question. But oftentimes those microaggressions are what remind us, oh, I'm still not quite enough like you. Thank you. That is a good reminder of how important it is to consider language and how we interact. EB.
Jenna, and thanks for Wing and Hannah's comments. And then this is really your comment also relate to my own response to this question as well. Because a lot of people know that many immigrants or Asian people coming to Canada, and they simply ask them, you have to become a blank of paper and learn everything and relearn and let go everything because you're now in this country, so you have to learn to be a Canadian. But this is actually you're simplifying in language to ask people to live their life, this is quite dangerous when you in introducing people to Canada. This is actually quite misleading sometimes because you can't ask people to let go their own identity, because identity, as we say, this is an ongoing process, and this is accumulating a lot of the beauty and riches and in developing your identity. But I personally heard that from some of my friends, and they say, and because they never have the people from other nations or from other countries, so but they are just showing their hospitality, and they're friendly and saying that we're gonna help you to do everything we could, help you to adapt to become a real Canadian. Sounds good. So, and then I realized that's kind of heavy burden because I didn't know and I have no idea. I didn't ask for it. And, but I would just want to say this is that you can see the micromanaging in this part when you are coming to a new environment and the friends or people or even not friends, they wanted to give you a lot of opinion because they are true Canadian. They know the questions and those kind of Canadian perspective. So I'm I really respect that because those are really important things as well. But there's something that also important to people who sharing their life experience in Canada as well, which is at some point that if you're not understanding enough or not willing to understand to learn the difference from the immigrants or the people from outside the country. For me as an Asian indigenous, and I encounter something which is I always observe that what can I learn from my friends, from my people that are around me. And then there's one thing that just recently happened to my kids. It happened to me as well, but I'll show you the conversation. Is one time that my daughter asked me, my friends told me that why are you a little bit dark than the usual Asian? And then my kids asked me, does that sound okay to you? And I said, no, this doesn't sound okay. I thought that they were your friends, and she said, this is my friends, and I'm not feel offended, but I just feel something weird when she say this word. And I asked her, can you describe how you feel about it? And say, I think it's a little racist. And I talked to my daughter and I say, let's call this micro-racism. Micro-racism. Because a lot of people are not paying attention. They actually unintentionally unaware that they are doing racism to their friends or people or some people that they have encountered. They probably say, oh, you have a really good English and you don't even have the accent. Where did you learn it and how long you've been here? And they're assuming that you are maybe raised and born here, or maybe you have a good educational background or something. But this is not the case because this is all based on the not enough understanding other people or knowing the difference, learning the difference from other people. So another case is it also happened to me and also happened to my kids as well, because this kind of thing is they're not just happen once or twice, they happen very often. But we understand that people are trying to figure it out, or maybe they asked the question, or maybe they get up to this situation they didn't know. But when we knowing this is keep happening, and we found out people are not really pay attention, they're actually hurting other people's feeling. But as a friends, we understand, and sometimes we mention it, but sometimes they just forget about it. But there one thing that I want to just share to this question is a lot of people notice that a lot of Asian or immigrant people, when they respond to the white people or raised and born Canadian, and they say, "Oh, you people are very polite, very kind, very funny, and very humor." And I believe a lot of people are very positive and very friendly. But you have to know a lot of people they showing their humor. For example, when my daughter's friends tell her that you have a darker skin, and she just like, well, I can't help about it. I can't help, and people just laugh. Okay, so she's in front of her friends. She kind of showing her humor, but you got to know this is her helpless reactions. She has no answer to those questions, and her friends, and she also they laugh about it, and then think gone. And next time it happen again to other circumstance. But you got to see not only the kids and also the adults can happen to this. Or even you have a really nice accent. It's different than the other people when they speak in English. And I just said that so what do you think about it? And I said, I think you are pretty good in English. And I laughed. And that is actually not that I really admire or appreciate they say it, because I really helpless. I don't know what to say because you are actually marking my English in front of me. So should I say thank you for marking my English level, or but this is the reaction when people are facing those micro racism and being vulnerable, and they want to resist, they want to react those discrimination experience. But instead of saying something or respond to them, they just laugh and showing their humor action. And I said, well, I can't help about it. My skin just dark as it is, so there's nothing I can do. So people will laugh, but you got to know people who ask the question, they will forget about it. But people who answer that you ask, they remember them for a long time. So I just want to say that people used to misunderstood that people are tend to be okay. They're really happy all the time and privileged to be being part of this in these places. But a lot of time people need to know that why are those people having the same reaction when I say their accents are good and when I say their skin are different and the fingers are look different, why they are all smiling at us.
Mhm.
But you gotta know that's a signal. Okay.
No, Evie, I really appreciate those stories. It's that idea of labor and burden. So it becomes the burden of you as the father, but also your children, to be the educators of what it means to have these differing identities and what it means to have darker skin or lighter skin or an accent or a different accent that you're not quite used to. And this labor and this burden of the labor gets put on us as people who have these different identities. And it's certainly coming from, I'm looking at the screen and we're all Asian, but we are all coming from very different contexts and very different experiences. And I keep thinking about that word, Hannah, that you used, the monolith. How is it that all of our experience are supposed to emulate the same piece? So when I think about this question of these common misconceptions of what it means to be part of the Asian diaspora, I remember, so I live in this really small town. It's in Uxbridge, but it's called Eudora. We have like a general store and a gas station. And the general store used to be owned by a white couple. And whenever I would walk into the general store, they would watch me and they would make me feel uncomfortable and they never said hello. And it's that kind of microaggression that you can't, like, if I went to some people, they would be like, oh yeah, that's not okay. And other people would be like, oh, they're probably just uncomfortable. They just don't know you. It's fine. You should just ignore it. But then a couple of years ago, the general store was bought by an Indian family. And, I've gotten to know this family quite well. And whenever I go in, we chat and we talk about, what it's like in our prospective warmer countries. And we talk about where our kids are at in their development and all of these different pieces. And they have this one cashier and she's also white. And there was one day where I noticed her just shrink. And I could tell, oh, she's uncomfortable because the experiences that I'm sharing with this Indian woman are experiences that she has never encountered in this small white town. She doesn't know where she fits into this space now. And it was just one of those moments where I kind of realized I'm in this space of freedom to be able to bring my full identity to the table. And in this moment, for the first time, perhaps, this other woman, this white woman, felt, oh, I don't belong in my own space anymore. And I think that those are some of those feelings that we all are navigating every day. And again, bringing forth that burden of labor of who is carrying these conversations. And when I think about, how these pieces play out, I think there's this idea of tokenism. And I think there's a lot of fear with encountering these conversations from white spaces. So it's too easy to say, okay, well, Jenna, you're a person of color, so I'm not even going to deal with the race stuff. This is all on you. But I think that what I'm hearing is in these conversations is we can't, how are we meant to be the ones to bring the conversations forward if those conversations aren't also coming forward from the majority spaces, from the white spaces? And if we're trying to be forced into this monolith, then how can we bring forth those conversations in a way that will enact real change and really push towards anti-racist practice? So I just want to thank you guys. That those were great reflections and really, sometimes hard to hear pieces, but important to hear pieces. So we're going to go and move on to, this is going to be our last kind of shared question here. So if for all of you who are joining in on our conversation here, if you have other questions that you'd like to ask, please feel free to write them in the chat, and we'll take a look at those once we finish here. But our last question is, what are some practical or concrete actions and mindsets that you believe individuals and institutions can adopt to develop a posture that supports and encourages Asian anti-racism? So can we give some lived examples or where we've seen these actions and mindsets lead to positive anti-racist change? And so, Evie, we're just going to jump right back to you and get your reflection on this piece here.
All right. My response to this question would be very short because I've said a lot in the first two. So I would say this: the practical actions on this, or the mindset of the understanding is to learn to understand people's needs and situations, because people always have different background and different circumstance at any time. But not only just the Asian or immigrants, everyone can be in that position. So intersecting identities is not a bad thing. I want to say and encourage the people out there that it's actually a blessing, because the more that you experience your life, if you're positively embracing your difference, then you actually can create an opportunity to be really helpful to other people, and then you can become a blessing as a hand of God to serving other people in your place, in your positions. And finally, I want to use one of my tribe's Bunun's philosophy to encourage and share with you about our goal in our life, because in one of our philosophy is in the Bunun tribe, we human is one of the beings in the creations. So our goal is to be part of the harmony in the creation, instead of becoming a center or dominating others. So we have been taught this for 1,000 years in our tribe. We never wanted to be a boss, be the controller. So that's why we speak to trees, we talk to animals, and we sing songs to the rivers and mountains, and we are asking support and help from the clouds. And those kind of practice we've been doing for 100,000 years. So I want to share with this that we human being as actually we consider as part of the harmony in the creations. So when you see that, you found out that you have no different than the others, because everyone's are in the same blessing creation that God have created. And I just want to say, express my gratitude to the United Church being in this denomination in the church, and it's a very inclusive and it's very welcoming environments. And knowing this, I can see the harmony in the United Church, not only through the conversation or action, but I can sense spirituality, the movement dynamics flowing in any aspect, any conversation or any situation. So that's my blessing to everyone. Thanks.
Thank you, Evie. Thank you for that blessing, and thank you for that reminder of that we're here to be the harmony. I think in the West we have such a focus on power and maintaining power and holding power. And even going back to your previous reflection on, we're told to be a blank piece of paper and soak up and become a real Canadian, that idea of this is the end goal. But to take a step back and to realize that we are all the same. We all have intersecting identities, and to embrace that as a piece of a positive part of life, as the positive part of harmony. That's a wonderful reminder. Thank you. Okay, Hannah, let's hear from you.
Thank you, Evie, for your blessing. I think the first point, or first kind of practical suggestion or action, is very tied to much of what Evie has mentioned with his children, and that is to not be afraid to talk to young people about racism. And one of the biggest impacts for myself in my journey of discovery and understanding my intersecting identities at a young age was that I had adults that I could talk to, and many of them are not people of color. So that would be a really key piece, if anything, to take away is having that openness and that curiosity and the courage to talk to young people. Which leads me to my second point in kind of the broader level of your community and where you are locally, is involving yourself or being aware of the organizations or institutions that give young people a community to talk about these things and to have relationships with role models and with intergenerational relationships. So that could be the library, a local library, that could be a school, that could even be in the church, if there are young people or youth groups. But it can also be online as well. A lot of the adults that I continue to stay in touch with, traveling from Saskatoon to Toronto, a lot of that has been happening online, where kind of sending resources to each other, or like, hey, I thought this book would interest you, and if it was on a topic of Asian identity. And so those kinds of points of connection, of seeing also the local communities and how you can help foster those relationship building moments, as well as maintaining those relationships that you have individually. I think that it's magical and transformative what representation and relationship can do to heal and to move forward towards justice. So those would be my pieces.
Thank you, Hannah. Yeah, especially these days where there's so much discourse around what is or is not appropriate to talk to kids about. I think one of the things I'm hearing here from Hannah, you as our youngest panel member, as well as Evie, who's talked about having to talk to his young children, and I know in my life as well, just this idea of the education can't start early enough. We have to be able to have these conversations, both to prepare for difficult conversations that some of our youngest might need to encounter, but also, like you say, Hannah, to have that hope and growth of representation, so that we're all able to see ourselves reflected in the spaces around us. Thank you. Wingy, I'd love to hear your reflection.
Thank you. So I think there are two daily practices that we can incorporate into our lives. First, very similar to what we just shared, I think we need to be aware of the existence of microaggressions in our daily life. Microaggressions are not direct acts of harassment, but rather subtle and in the various forms of intentional or unintentional actions or comments. For example, one common microaggression experienced by Asians is being made to feel not good enough. Asian individuals are often seen as model immigrants who strive to adapt and obediently follow societal norms. When someone constantly reminds you that your accent, appearance, or gender make you inadequate, or indirectly suggests that your expertise is less valuable because of who you are or where you're from, it can become a form of microaggression. These comments can be particularly harmful when they come from someone in a position of power, such as a head pastor commenting on an intern. All of these experiences can make individuals feel bad about themselves and question their place within an organization. This is especially true for Asian women, who are often stereotyped as quiet and submissive. So, it is crucial for us to be aware of everyday microaggressions and strive to avoid perpetuating them. To avoid committing microaggressions, it is important to focus not on ourselves, but rather on understanding who we are talking to and the context in which our words may impact them. Truly respecting all people is a way to fulfill the command of loving our neighbors, as Jesus requests. Second, we need to truly embrace our coexistence on this land. Recognizing the land we live on is a positive step. And I appreciate how UCC adopts that land acknowledgement in the order of service. However, it is not enough to simply acknowledge it intellectually. We need to internalize this acknowledgement and understand that no individual has the right to determine who is an outsider or a perpetual foreigner. It is essential, especially essential for white people to develop an awareness that they are not the original owners of this land. The reality is that we are all sharing and coexisting on this land. No one person can claim the authority to determine who belongs or who should return to their previous space. This awareness should not only remain an external performance, but it needs to also be internalized into part of our identities. So, by addressing microaggressions in our daily lives and embracing the coexistence of all individuals on this land, we may recognize the impact of intersectionality and challenging misconceptions. We can then foster a more inclusive and accurate understanding of the Asian diaspora. It is through this collective effort that we can break barriers and foster a more inclusive and accepting environment for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Winnie. I really appreciate those pieces of daily practice that we can bring forth. So it's not one thing that you can just do once and check off, but they are things we need to reflect on. And just thinking about this idea of, again, we've come back to the topic of microaggressions or microracisms a few times in our conversation tonight. And I think one thing that can happen is that we can become props in other people's stories as we become that kind of model minority or that model person to be able to speak into what these things are. But we aren't props. And so we can't be props whether or not it's through we've done your light acknowledgement, so now let's move on, or any of those other pieces. We are full people that want to be able to participate fully and bring all parts of our identities to the table. And when I think about these practical ways to address, Asian anti-racism as well as moving towards anti-racism in general, I think one of the biggest things that I think of is the idea of making space, but making intentional space, not tokenizing space, not space that says, oh, well, we have one Asian member on our panel and one Black member on our panel, so we're all good, but making intentional space for the multiplicity of voices and the multiple identities that we have so that we can hear from these perspectives again and again and again. It's not just one and done. Again, it's that daily practice, it's that continued practice. And sometimes when I have seen people make space, it's, again, that, oh, well, I can't talk about this, so I'm going to bring someone else who can talk about this. But making space isn't just calling someone into a panel. It's not just calling someone into a position so that their face can be representative. Making space means really creating a place where they can take those people and those experiences and those identities that we're trying to see and have represented, can take full ownership and can say, this is who I am, and this is why my perspective might be this way. This is why people like me may also feel the same way. And to be able to bring that again into other practices, into other places that we talk about these things, and to continually reassess, okay, from different perspectives, why are we doing this? So one way that I've seen, it's a small thing, but if you're going to talk about, we're here talking about Asian identity. So if you're going to talk about Asianness, or if you're going to make a post for, it's June, so you're going to make a post for Asian and Pan Pacific Month, reach out to those in your community who are from those identity spaces and say, hey, how do you think this reads? Does this look good? Does this look bad? Because I've seen it where people have pushed out communications. They haven't done the work to talk with the people around them, and it's not hit the mark, and the communications or what we're trying to say just don't work out well. And I've seen it where it works really well because that extra step of daily practice of saying, no, we need to bring people, we need to make that space has really helped to bring forth that representation that Hannah was talking about. So that's the end of our kind of main questions here. So I know that I do see at least one question in the chat here that we'll get to in a minute. And if anyone else here has any questions, please, again, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll get to them and we'll continue on the conversation for a few more minutes here. But Donald Brown asked, what should people say to begin a relationship of understanding the people of different cultures? I usually start with, I love your accent, as I find accents beautiful. What should I say and how do we begin that conversation? I think that's a really good question because I think, again, Evie, you were talking about Canadians coming from this happy, joyful, funny stance, but sometimes those interactions can mask some of the feelings that we may be feeling. Hannah, or you or Evie, Evie, I see you've unmuted, so I'll pass
I'd like to answer the question. Thank you, Donald. This is a really typical question that I've been asked 100 times in the past, and until certain time, the people never ask me the question. They ask me, instead of asking my English, where did I learn, how did I do this, and they ask me, let's go for hockey game. So we're going to because when people asking the question because they wanted to build the relationship with you, they want to become your friends, and we know they have a good intention, but you would know when people doesn't have good intention, you would soon find out they are not here for being a friend. But for people who want to make friends, people will sense that you are humbling yourself and you wanted to get to know them, so get to know more about them. And my friends, when I was studying in seminary, and a lot of students and teachers, when they first come to me and then they say this, Evie, do you know there's a hockey in Canada? And I say, I heard about it. And I say, I have an extra ticket. Want to go? And I say, sure, let's go. So then he introduced the culture, the hockey culture and Canadian things. And we went to there and he showed me everything. And he never asked my English or my accent. And then gradually, and then I began to have trusting. There's a trust in the relationship. So whenever he say after that, we're bonding together, the friendships already, and he is now officially built up a relationship as a friends. Then you understand when people are asking you some hard or question, and they have a good intention for you. Because when friends are truly friends, they tell the truth and they be honest with you. And they say, Evie, your accent are stuck. I can understand when you say this article, but I always say, okay, how should I say that? But this is a really good and helping. I mean, this is the part that when friends are helping friends, and it's never about the Asians and accent anymore. But when you first come front to friends or that you never met before, try to introduce yourself and help them to understand you or understand the environment. But I would say this: leave the English or accent for later conversations, because they're already very nervous about learning language when they first come to Canada, and then you don't want to give them too much pressure and very stressed about English and language. So, but that's my my experience. So maybe some other can answer. Yeah.
So Wayne, Hannah, if you have any comments, feel free to pipe in. But I also see another related question from Pauline. What would be an appropriate response if someone tells me that they love my accent, especially when I think the comment has racist connotations? That's such an interest, I mean, it's one of those pieces, right, that we all live with. How do you respond to questions that make you feel uncomfortable? Yeah. I'm not sure if any of our panelists here have a response to that. I think, sometimes I can be a little bit more confrontational than maybe some people are comfortable with. But I think it's okay to say, you know, return that. Oh, you love my accent? I love your accent also. There are those reminders that because someone might think of themselves as being normal or the base, you know, this is base level, flipping that question back to them and saying, oh yeah, your accent is really lovely too. Where does that come from? Even if it seems so obvious, I think that those are really important ways that we can take those questions and show them that we all have a way to answer them. And it, you know, it's kind of like that piece of, where are you from? Where are you really from? You know what I mean. Where are you really, really from? And just being able to flip that as well. Oh, well, where are you really from? Oh, where are you really, really from? And I think that that's a way to, you know, again, bring back to that common experience that Evie was sharing, I think, about we all have these pieces of our intersecting identities and calling that piece forth. I'm not sure if anyone else has anything to add. Evie?
If I can respond a little bit, I have those conversations in the past asking me, where are you really from? You don't look like Taiwanese. You don't look like Chinese. You don't look like Thailand. And I say, I'm Taiwan indigenous, you know? And I try to share more experience and more knowledge or information about my background. But sometimes some people, they're not up to that. They just want to figure out where you're from, and that's it. So then they feel content and they just walk away. Some people, they just not here to be your friends, and like they're here to wanted to some people wanted to tell you something, and if you are really uh into that conversation, you might into a trap. Some people might wanted to know, okay, where you're from and how did you get here? And what is your purpose in when at the first place. But I found that that's very very not friendly in the conversation. So usually I just when I was younger, I just laughed. I mean, the sense of humor. And I say, oh, you are so funny. I don't really know how to answer you. And then I walk away. And because this is not a proper conversation I would like to have. So you don't have to take this on your shoulder when you encounter those kind of people are not understanding your situation, not knowing you, but they pretend to know that you need to get help or you need to hear something from them. But this is the conversation that I always say, if I talk to 10 years younger of me, and I'll tell them, just Evie, just walk away. You don't need those conversations because they're gonna discourage you, even though they didn't aware, but when you go home, you would think about them. Why that man say that my English needs improvement, and but they're not even my friends. They're just, passengers that I was sitting together and on the bus, or people are just happen having a conversation in a restaurant, in a McDonald's restaurant, and they're just asking from the curiosity. But sometimes they did not pay attention. Maybe they're not they are unaware they're saying those things might be hurting other people, feeling hurting them idle after the conversation. And I would say that when people asking you from the bottom part as a friend, they give you a very comfort space. As Jenna said, that there's a space already created for you. So when people asking a certain questions or some certain content, you feel safe and you feel okay to respond them, and you feel supported. So, and it actually depends on the different situation. So friendship and trust in between is really important.
And yeah, can I respond to a bit about Pauline's question, added to all of your response? So from Pauline's question, I think it is a situation when we feel like we wonder if we experience a kind of microaggression. The lie itself sounds very neutral. Yeah, just like what we just shared, quite depends on how you speak it, your gesture, and our relationship between the speaker and the recipient, right? But at the same time, the person who received the comment feels like, oh, we start to keep thinking, is there something wrong there? And what we can do to a situation like this, right? I think the question is asking about the acts that we can respond to a different kind of microaggression. And the question reminds me of an example from my friend, what she did when she faced situation like this. So let me share briefly of her story with you all. Then maybe we can think of what we can do to respond that. So I have a friend. She is also a graduate student, and in one of her classes, the professor referred to her and another Asian women student as young lady, meanwhile calling other non-Asian students by their preferred names. So the first step my friend did is to try to correct her professor multiple times on how her actual name can be pronounced, but nothing changed. Soon then, she started questioning whether this was a form of microaggression or if she was overreacting. Eventually, she decided to share her thoughts with other students who may have similar experiences in the class. And after confirming the shared struggles they had, she made the brave choice to report the situation to the school. Although her action may seem small, I believe that it sets a great example of how we can resist daily racism. By bravely sharing our own stories with our companions. For example, like a group like this, we share our struggles, our suspects, and also share it with institutions that could carry our further actions. We are allowing our voices to be heard, and we are resisting the status quo that is harmful to certain groups of people. It is speaking up for ourselves, and at the same time, it's also allowing others to reflect on their positionality in initiating or sustaining the violence with the words they use or the silence they choose to keep. So I think the action of sharing stories of microaggression is contributing to creating a more racially inclusive environment within our community. I hope it can respond part of Pauline's question.
Thank you, Winnie. Yeah, I think sometimes we're forced to speak much louder than maybe some of our peers when we're encountered with these microaggressions, which can be, again, that unfair burden, but that piece of action that sometimes is necessary. So that's, I mean, to report that, I think a lot of people would see that as being an overreaction to something that's not that big of a deal. You should just forget about it, but not realizing that that's not one example that happened once. That's something that is happening every day through multiple moments, through multiple places. And that is just one space where she was able to create a space of change and use her voice to hopefully enact change. Okay, thank you. That was a wonderful story and a good reminder. And thank you, Pauline, for your comment that this is helpful. So I'm just going to call out one more time if anyone has any questions to pop them in the chat. We're nearing the end of our time here, but before we close, I am relatively new to the United Church. And so one of the things that I've been thinking throughout this evening is, what's my experience as a person of Asian heritage within the United Church compared to my experience as a person with Asian heritage, and of course all the other intersecting identities I hold as well with the non-United Church. I will leave it with that without getting too much more specific. And I think for me, while there is always going to be more work to be done as we seek to become an anti-racist denomination, and as we seek anti-racism in all of the different spaces that we encounter, is that the conversations are happening. And, so Adele, I want to thank you again for arranging not just this evening, but also for continuing on these 40 days of anti-racism year over year. That I can only imagine the emotional toll it takes on you to bring together all of these stories and all of these experiences and to hear all of these different pieces. But I think for me that this is, one of those experiences that I've had within the United Church that helps me to see that piece of action. So again, not just saying in practice we'll do these things, but here's an actual action. And for all of you that are joining in with us tonight, I mean, I'm so encouraged. I can say from my, 15 or so years of experience working in other denominations, if I had organized an event like this, I don't think that I would have even a quarter of the attendance that we've had this evening. So I just want to thank all of you here tonight as well for joining us in this conversation, to listening to our stories, and to for considering, you know, these perspectives maybe that are part of yourself or outside of yourself or intersecting with your identities as well. So thank you, Adele. Thank you, all of you who are attending. And of course, thank you, Wing, EB, and Yanna. Sorry. We have one more quick question here. What is an opening sentence then if you are waiting in a doctor's office, for example, if you just want to begin knowing something? So I will open it up, but I just think sometimes it's not about, you know, the things you see on someone's face. It would be the same opening sentence that you would give to anyone else if they didn't happen to be someone of a different race or a different ethnicity, would be my consideration. So what do you do for work is one, or do you have kids? I'm not sure if anyone else has anything else that they'd like to add to that.
I'm thinking with that question of experiences that my friends have had interacting with people who want to get to know them, and sometimes there is a little bit of a different social norms in terms of how to start conversations. And so sometimes I think one important thing to note is, like Jenna said, definitely opening as you would to anyone who you'd like to get to know. But if that isn't received in the way that you were expecting, or that doesn't open a conversation, or that you offer or invite someone to speak or to start a conversation and it's not received the way that you were expecting and it doesn't go anywhere, not being discouraged by that or projecting onto them, because it could be for many different factors, just the space that you're in, the environment at the time, that you are not getting that relationship that you were, or building that relationship that you were expecting to. So I think having that reminder, or coming with that awareness of you as a person, and what kind of how your appearance kind of can be in a space and kind of change the interaction that you have. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Hannah. Evie?
I have 3-second policy on my own lives because I don't usually talk to people in a clinic or in a hospital unless I am doing the visitation or I have some agenda to work. But if I'm in a random street, or in a store, I have a policy in myself. If a person look at me 3 seconds, I'll talk to them. That's mean you're giving me permission to connect with you, because and that's based on some studies. And when people interest you, they look at you for a few seconds, and that's your really good opportunity to maybe make a new friends and have a conversation. And I always start with the weather. Canadian really like talk about weather, and because the weather here is so beautiful, and that works every time. I talk to this homeless people, talk to the policeman, talk to the doctor. Whoever look at me 3 seconds, I talk to you and I say, "Hi, sir, how are you doing?" And they were just like, "Okay," and the person talking to me, and when they open the conversation, they probably didn't intend to talk to you, but when you respond to their gesture, look at you, and they will feel like, oh, you also open to them. So then they actually create a harmony space and building a relationship. And that's how I found many friends and good people around my community, because a lot of people really are really kind and really nice around in your community. So that would be a good opportunity. I'm just sharing this.
Thank you. Okay, so I think that we're gonna come to an end here now. Before we close, on our screen here, you'll see a contact, so anti-racism@united-church.ca. If you have any other questions or if you have any other comments or feedback, feel free to reach out to that email there. If you want to reach out to the panelists, you can also send an email to that, a message to that email, and they'll make sure it gets to us. And one more note of housekeeping. When we close tonight and when you click that leave button to exit out of our session this evening, you're going to have an opportunity to take a survey, which is going to be, we would really appreciate if you could fill that out and take a minute or two to give us some feedback on the session and all the different pieces there as well. But just remember that that will come up after you click the leave button. And just as we close here, sorry, give me 1 minute here. I just want to close with a couple of lines from our song of faith that we have at the United Church of Canada. It's the opening words that I thought fit well for this evening. God is holy mystery, beyond complete knowledge, above perfect description. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you to our panelists for joining us and sharing with us this evening. And I hope you all have a great evening, rest of your evenings as well. Thank you.